there are no magic beans when it comes to getting into the real estate market. People often ask, what can I do? How can I get in? At the end of the day, you need income. Okay, you're going to need the income. You should be reducing your consumer debt. You're going to need good credit if you want to get the best terms out there with the best interest rates to save on your monthly mortgage costs. But find a way to raise your income, find a way to raise your savings. You might not be able to do that on your own. Maybe you only have one job and there's no way to get, a raise or whatever. But now this is where you need to come in and start being resourceful. If you can't do it on your own, who can you connect with? Who do you need to talk to be able to get to where you want to go? Which is why I say you always want to start with the goal setting.
Are you tired of hearing about the ongoing interest rate hikes and seeing media ads about how hard it is to buy your first property? In this episode, our guests, Phyllicia Walsh and Michael Allicock, are a realtor and a mortgage agent. We discussed the current state of the real estate market, including an outlook for the remainder of the year, how Phyllicia and Michael applied the house hacking strategy to get into their first investment property, and much more. Let's get started. You're listening to the Black Wealth Effect podcast, where we're all about inspiring the next generation of Black Canadian real estate investors to succeed financially. If you're tuned in, that means you're hungry to take action and build wealth outside of your 9-to-5. We'll be sitting down with Black real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and allies to discuss a diverse set of topics to help you along your investing journey. Let's get started.
What's going on, everyone? Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Black Wealth Effect podcast. We have two special guests with us today, Phyllicia and Mike. Phyllicia and Mike, how are you guys doing today?
We're good. Thank you.
Yeah, we're doing very well. Thanks.
Awesome. So, Phyllicia, we've known each other for some time now. Just happy to get to know you. And I think today we'll get to know you a bit more on a personal level. But from our conversations in the past, you seem very passionate about educating others within our community about real estate and the opportunities it could create for us. What does generational wealth mean to you as someone who's transitioned from renting to home ownership? And why do you think generational wealth is important within the Black community?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm very passionate about educating others on real estate and financial education. And for me, when I think about wealth, I really do think about freedom of choice because, growing up, being the youngest of 5, I felt like I needed to start over from ground zero and I had to go to school. I had to take this course. I had to take this job to make ends meet, to pay my bills, and to go down that path. Mm-hmm. I don't want my kids to have to do that. I want them to be able to grow up and say, you know what, I want to go take this course. I want to work for someone, or I want to work for myself. So they now have that platform to choose and have those options for them.
Absolutely. I think the power of choice is so underrated. Like, to be able to give your kids that is so important. And the fact that we have to always start at ground zero, I think that's something that we have to really change as a community.
Yeah, it's a very common story that I come across when I'm speaking with clients who are Black. And I tell them my story, why I got into real estate. And 99% of the time, they say to me, I relate to your story in some way, shape, or form. And that is why I am so educational based with the information.
That's awesome. We're just changing lives out here. So I'm happy to see that. So, with both of you being active professionals in the real estate space, how do you balance, actively working on the business and managing family life effectively to scale your real estate investing business?
I mean, it's definitely a lot and it brings its challenges.
Yeah, definitely. I think the most important thing for us is communication. because we have such busy schedules, we need to communicate. We need to know what's going on in each other's days. We actually sync our calendars together. So if we have something that may pertain to either both of us or one of us, that it's in our calendars so that we know what's going on in each other's days as well.
Yeah. And because we're both in the real estate space as well, our clients can be demanding at times. And sometimes you have to be available when that call comes in. If there's a house that just came on the market or if something goes wrong in the back end for Mike when he's doing the mortgages. So sometimes, it comes as a little surprise, but we just both have to be really responsive to each other's schedules and needs.
Yeah. There's a willingness to be flexible as well. Too.
Yeah.
Just understand that things might not go the way you have it planned all the time, but as long as you have a schedule, but then, leave room for variance. Yeah.
That's great. So that's a life hacker right there. The fact that you both sync your calendars, I think it just really creates a lot of efficiency and really just simplifies your life a whole lot.
And actually, on the topic of hacking, we know you recently purchased your first investment property utilizing the house hacking strategy. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and also share any key learnings that you had?
Yeah, for sure. I think Mike will get into a little bit of detail with that. But our whole thing was, we had our first child. We were in our late 20s. We were renting a basement apartment. And this is long before I was a real estate agent, but I was good renting. I thought we were good. We have money in savings. I don't want to be stuck to a mortgage. Why do I want, to be in debt for the next 25 years? We have the freedom to move whenever we have the freedom, quote unquote, to move whenever we want. And then the second child came. And I think like 4 weeks after I had given birth, our landlord handed us an eviction notice and said, hey, we just sold the house. We'll be moving. So, figure out what you're going to do with your life. We were voluntold to move out of our house. And that is when we started to look into real estate and this option.
Yeah, seriously. Because we did have a plan to purchase. It was sort of like a mindset shift for Phyllicia mainly, just because she didn't want to have any debt and just saw the house as like, okay, it's going to take us 25, 30 years to pay this thing off. Why would we want to do that? We could just save money and travel and just kind of live. But then when you have a family, and then someone tells you got to move, now that becomes a hassle as well. So, getting a house more seriously, we did have a plan, but, that move to evict us sort of expedited our plan. And so house hacking was the best option just because it was a balance between us saving or not wanting to be so much in debt and still having an ownership aspect and building wealth that way. So for those that don't know, house hacking is when you live in one portion of the home and somebody else is also living in another portion, whether it's a duplex or secondary suite or even just renting a room. That someone else is helping you pay those monthly costs. And so that's what we decided to do. When we looked for a home, it had to be a property that had a separate entrance. And so we only looked at those types of properties that we could potentially add a second suite to. And we found that property in a market that we really liked. And fortunately enough, too, the property was undervalued for what was in the area as well. And there wasn't much interest because, number one, when you walked in to that property, well, our current home, the smell, the aesthetics, there was just so much.
It was an eyesore. My mouth, like my jaw dropped the first time I walked. This is after we signed the papers to purchase because I trusted Mike's eyes. I didn't actually see it, but my jaw dropped. I'm like, what did you get us into? But in hindsight, the best decision we ever made.
Yeah, I'll never forget that face that when she looked at me when she first walked in. She was like, in her head, no, like, what are you doing? I trusted you. But now, she's good. So yeah, with our first property, we purchased it at $535,000. we were putting the minimum down payment down. So that's considered an insured mortgage. And so you have to pay the mortgage insurance premium on top of that. But that allowed us to put down about $23,000. And our loan actually was a mortgage plus improvement loan. So we had a portion in there to do some fixes as well. And so that was great. So already off the bat, we purchased at 535 and the ARV or after repair value is about 620. So there's some room there. All in, we were in for a mortgage for about 540,000. And we put about, let's say 50,000 into renovations. I did a lot of the work myself, just took time to kind of do it. So that helped with the cost because up front, we didn't have the capital up front to sort of do it. So I did most of the work myself. But once we got completed and everything was good, all in, we were probably in for 590,000 with renovations. And our mortgage at that time with mortgage and property tax was probably about $3,000. And at that point, if you're using the ARV of 620, we got about 30,000 in equity off the bat just from putting in that extra work. That's not including any mortgage pay down or anything like that. So now we have a legal secondary suite, and it's a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, and we rent it for $1,850 plus utilities. So if we just work with the $1,850, that coming off of our expense of $3,000, we're roughly in that ballpark for what we were renting at, because we were renting for about $1,200 per month in that basement apartment. And essentially now we own a home and we're pretty much, at the same cost, right? And so that's the benefit of house hacking.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And like you touched on it, right? Like in terms of getting that first property, you definitely do have to be nimble and creative with your approach. And it sounds like you definitely learned a lot just going through the process.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
The first property doesn't have to be perfect for, everyone listening out there, because I see that a lot as a real estate agent, first time buyers with limited budgets, they come in and they want turnkey property. Everything needs to be renovated. And when they see the house that has a little bit of carpet or it needs some painting or it has the laminate countertops, it's a complete no, like automatic no. Because I don't think people realize how inexpensive relatively it is to actually fix these things and increase the value of your property. So it's one mistake that I see a lot of people make, and I wish people could kind of have that foresight to see more value in these homes.
Mm-hmm.
Just to add, you got to take, as an investor, you got to take the risk, right? And you got to just take the leap and take action, because had we never taken that action, we wouldn't have learned all the things that we learned. So now we understand what to look for when you're looking for a property that maybe you want to convert into a second suite. We know what to look for, mold and, certain plumbing issues and things like that. So sometimes you just got to take the leap, and there's learning along the way, right? You don't have to know everything up front before you go in. Sometimes you can learn along the way. Yes, it might be a little bit more costly, but you're taking action, which is most important.
Love to hear it. Taking action, as you said, is definitely the most important thing. Now, if we fast forward a little bit, I know more recently you completed renovations and tenanted your second investment property with a slightly different approach. Can you talk a little bit about how the strategy you utilized for your second property differed from your first purchase?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a total change, because at this point now for our second property, we're both working in the industry. We already have our first house, and we also have equity from our first house to use on the second property. Before, we literally emptied our life savings. So just having that equity there to leverage it to buy the second property was a huge difference in the process. We were able to get, firsthand information on the property that we got, because it was on the MLS. It was not an off-market deal. And Mike, being in mortgages, he was also able to get us a deal on the rate side. We did get variable, but he was able to buy down the rate for us as well. So that helped when we have all those factors playing a role. But, it did take us a while to find the second property, because when we were ready to buy now, the market, as you all know, it went crazy. The whole pandemic market was wild. So we didn't get a property until it was June 1st of this year, really. We were looking for a good 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, I would say we were looking probably closer to a year. A lot of the properties were, and this is in the pandemic boom, right? A lot of the properties that we're looking at were like traditional investor areas. You know, they were total gut jobs and they were going for the price of a finished home. And so it's like, this is definitely not going to work.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah. So, I mean, it took us a little bit longer to find that second property, but once we did, and we were ready to run the numbers. So we were running numbers on multiple properties. And then this one checked all the boxes and we just had to strike on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You touched on COVID earlier in the conversation and how, you know, it created this mad rush where people are buying properties at, you know, ridiculous and unprecedented prices, basically buying at the top of the market. Fast forward a few months, interest rates start to rise, home values take a bit of a hit. You know, people are a bit more apprehensive, and added to that, you know, the media starts to chiming about doom and gloom, buyer beware, sort of sentiment where they're saying, you know, the market's going to crash, right? What are you seeing from your professional perspective as a realtor and a mortgage agent? You know, walk us through what you're seeing in the market and, you know, the effects of these rise in interest rates.
Yeah. I mean, from a realtor perspective, you know, first of all, I just want to say, like, this was expected. Maybe not the sharp rate increases that we are seeing, but for you to think from 2020 to now that the market wasn't going to change or reverse at some point, you know, you're being very naive. There is no way we were going to continue to go up and the prices were going to continue to increase at the rate they were going. It was unsustainable. And so a lot of people who were buying, and let's just talk about this year alone, a lot of people that were buying at the beginning of the year, February, we were at the peak of the market. There was crazy demand, low inventory, the same story that has been repeated. People have this fear of missing out. Everybody needs a house. There's not enough inventory across Canada. Media headlines are scaring people into buying houses, and rates are still considerably low at this point. I'm telling you, I saw a house in Oshawa, a detached 4-bedroom house in Oshawa, go for $1.6 million. 2 years ago, these houses are like $600,000. And so everyone's buying these houses. And what happens? You close 30, 60, 90 days later, and all of a sudden, Bank of Canada says, inflation, we created this inflation. Well, they didn't say we created it, but inflation is so high, we need to battle inflation. The current rates need to change. We're raising rates. This is a shock to people because a lot of people are getting variable rates, and because they're a lot lower than the fixed. So a lot of people are getting these variable rates. By the time they're ready to close 60 days later, their affordability has decreased dramatically. And what we're seeing on the back end is buyers are no longer able to close on the properties, and they're going into litigation. Sellers are like, what the heck? We need our money. Buyers are like, we can no longer afford this house. The buyer loses their deposit. The house goes back onto the market, $200,000, $300,000 below what it was originally listed for 2 months ago. And now this is where you're starting to see that domino effect. Prices are crashing, and I'm saying quote unquote, you can't see me. Prices are crashing, prices are coming down from February numbers. Right. So I'm not going to say it's a crash right now. I will say we are definitely seeing a market correction, and I don't think it's over yet because there are still buyers going through litigation, and there are still a lot of buyers who have defaulted. Like Mike has a pretty good example of that. I don't know if you want to share that story.
Yeah. I mean, I have a client who purchased a home, and their financing, essentially, they were supposed to go to a specific lender, but now the value of the home has come down significantly that they actually don't have the funds to close on it. So now they're having to go to alternative route, private lending, to be able to close on the property. And so, yeah, I mean, like there's a lot of shakeup in the market right now. Interest rates spiked up extremely quickly. Most people weren't expecting it, especially on the B side of lending. Rates have basically doubled. So anyone that's going to be renewing, say, next year or had that in the 2% range, they're going to be looking at a 5% in the 5% range right now. So, that's going to obviously impact people's bottom line.
And that's a good point too, because there are a lot of people, even investors, who got the variable interest rate, but they're only on a 1 or 2 year term. What happens now when you need to renew? And what are the rates going to look like at that point? And so we might see even more people down the line defaulting and maybe having to sell their properties based on payments, right?
Yeah, but I mean, it's an opportunity in the market, right? I mean, with every correction comes opportunity, but this is why it's so important to run your numbers properly and account for risk. And that risk is, interest rates going up or a loss of income or something. You need to insulate yourself and account for those types of things when you run your numbers, right? And so if you want to get into investing and you want to do investing, you have to run the numbers properly. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
I'll just go on I guess on a more macro scale of what's going on. Obviously, low interest rates over the pandemic. Everyone thought everything was going to crash, so they lowered interest rates to the floor to spur demand. This is exactly what the Bank of Canada said. Go out and buy a mortgage. We're going to keep interest rates low for the foreseeable future. Well, everyone went out and started buying houses, and house prices rocketed upwards. Not sustainable. There's a lot of cash in the market, right? So now with all that cash chasing few goods, the price of everything else is going up. So now we see inflation starting to pick up. So now inflation is picking up at a uncontrollable rate, as increasing the cost for people, just everyday citizens. Bank of Canada now has to lower that inflation rate. So how do they do that? By raising interest rates to slow demand. And so they actually ended up raising interest rates earlier than they told us at the beginning of the pandemic that they would. Mm-hmm. And so now that they're raising rates, everyone's caught off guard. But if you're following what's going on and you understand the economics behind it, then you kind of see this and you prepare for it.
Yeah.
And so that's where we're at. Bank of Canada is raising rates, prices, stock prices, home prices are ultimately impacted, right? And
we expect another rate hike coming September 13th. They're anticipating 50 to 75 basis points because US just raised theirs another 75 basis points. So that will be interesting to see how that impacts us more.
It'll definitely be interesting to see how that pans out. On that point, as it relates to affordability, like us, you've probably heard of friends or family saying, I can never afford a house or home prices are way too high. What advice would you give to that person in terms of getting into the market as it relates to mindset or any specific tactics they could practice?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to mindset. And I can say that just from personal experience, because even when we were looking to buy our first house, we could not afford houses. I thought everything was overpriced. And I'm like, we're never going to get into a house. But we really did have to, well, at least I did. I really did have to change my mindset, first of all. And then I think educating yourself, because you can listen to the media, you can listen to friends, but they might not even know what they're talking about or what's happening. And so when Mike says looking at things on a macro level, looking at the economy as a whole to truly understand how this kind of ricochets throughout the market, having that true understanding will actually help you plan to get into the market. So as a first-time buyer, if you truly want to get in, if this is what you really want to do, first of all, have your goal in place. Why are you doing this? Are you doing it because it's the next thing to do in life? Because buying a house is the thing to do? If that's your reasoning, you might want to sit down and think a little bit more as to why you want to get a house. what the true long-term future goal is, because there's more to real estate than just owning a house. But, find friends, family who might want to come in together and do a joint venture, as we would call it in the investing world. Or if you have a family member who owns property and you can borrow equity from them, I believe there truly are lots of opportunities. As soon as you have those goals in place, opportunities somehow just start appearing because you are so laser focused on what you want. The opportunities arise. And I'm sure the two of you could speak to that, being real estate investors and being part of those different networks, how many opportunities there actually are buzzing out there, right? So I don't know if you have more.
Yeah. Well, there's a quote that says, if you say you can't or you say you can, you're right.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's all about mindset. Whatever you put your mind to and you say, okay, I can do this. This is what I want. Then it's going to happen. It might not be, you might have to sacrifice some things. All right. Not everything that you want, say, location wise or space wise might be, ideal, but it can happen, so it's all about mindset at the end of the day.
And I would just like to add that there are no magic beans when it comes to getting into the real estate market. People often ask, what can I do? How can I get in? At the end of the day, you need income. Okay. You're going to need the income. You should be reducing your consumer debt. You're going to need good credit if you want to get the best terms out there with the best interest rates to save on your monthly mortgage costs. But find a way to raise your income, find a way to raise your savings. You might not be able to do that on your own. Maybe you only have one job and there's no way to get, a raise or whatever. But now this is where you need to come in and start being resourceful. If you can't do it on your own, who can you connect with? Who do you need to talk to be able to get to where you want to go? Which is why I say you always want to start with the goal setting.
Sure. Obviously, speaking with professionals in the industry, if your focus is investments, investor focused realtor, mortgage agent, but even still, I would say, even if your goal is still not investments, still investor focused real estate and mortgage agent, because we just understand, the full dynamic.
I'm looking like as an agent, an investor, I'm not just looking at MLS. I'm looking at off-market deals too. So whatever I can find in my network, that's where the opportunity is. So when I work with my clients, I tell them straight up, I'm like, we might not find this on MLS. I might know somebody who knows somebody who has a deal for you. And that's just how we do it, because at the end of the day, it's all about getting to that first house and then leveraging it for your next step.
Absolutely. Those were crucial points that you gave us there. Just take action. At the end of the day, basically, that's all you can do is just take action. And, this was a great conversation. Before we end off today's episode, though, could you guys just let us know what you have going on the real estate side? What are your plans for the rest of the year? Have you made any changes? And just let our listeners know how they could reach out to you guys.
So in terms of real estate, we just got our tenant for our property. So we had bought it. We had one vacant unit. We renovated it. So the renovations are now done. We have our tenant in place starting September 1st. So we're really excited about that. So now that that's off the plate, I think we can start focusing on our next venture. We definitely want to get into another multifamily this year, just on the residential side, not commercial. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, we're looking for another multifamily unit, ideally this year, but we're also going on vacation soon to Florida. So we're going to do some shopping down there and see what that market's like, because Florida's always sunny.
Yeah, I think like short-term rentals right now, especially the way, not just the real estate market, but like the financial markets are going, there's a little bit of uncertainty around that. So short-term rentals kind of seem like
good opportunity.
A very good opportunity right now to make a little bit higher cash flow in the short term.
In terms of reaching out, you can find me on Instagram at Mike the Entrepreneur, or my email, Allicock, ALLICOCK, at ctmortgagesolutions.com.
It's so long. And for me, my name is Phyllicia Walsh, Toronto realtor, homeowner, and investor. You can reach me on social media. So TikTok, Instagram at Just Get Realty. And my email address, Phyllicia at justgetrealty.com. And that's probably the best way. Well, Instagram is probably the best way you can reach me.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for your time today. Mike and Phyllicia, this was a very great and insightful conversation with you guys, just to get a full picture of what's happening within the market right now. To our listeners, thank you again for tuning in, and we'll definitely catch you on the next episode. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
What was the one thing you heard today that inspires you to take action? Now plan to take that action in the next 24 hours. If you're looking for more support, ideas, or just want to connect with others like you taking action, join us in the Black Wealth Effect Facebook group. The link is in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the Black Wealth Effect podcast.